some of them, they'd set up their tables, they hadn't confirmed everything was working. So some of them, you just walked around and said, yeah, that looks nice. I wonder what's going to happen later, because nothing was moving. But, given a couple of hours, I think we walked around everything, we sat down, and then round about midday, I started walking around the displays, and some of them were actually running. So we took a few videos of that. Well, the ones that were running, I mean, there were basically two models. You had the big roundies. Now, one of them was a live steam, sort of garden scale models. Obviously, that's a roundy. There's not a lot in the way of scenery. The locomotives are huge, comparatively speaking, and so you kind of accept that. All they're going to do is they're going to get the locomotive steamed and then run around the track for about 20 minutes or however long the fuel lasts, and then they have to pull them off to one side and let them cool down and service, and by that time they've got another one that's ready to go. So that's kind of fun. And then they had a few which were roundy, smaller scale, N scale, 00 scale, double O scale. British model railway, everyone is doing British models. So, and they'd stick a locomotive on the track and just let it run round. And so there wasn't the variety. Once you'd seen the train go past twice, it's not going to change the next time it comes round. And then there were the smaller displays, which, a couple of feet long, or 10, 12, 16 feet long, with a yard at each end, where, or generally, if it's a through track, it's a yard at each end. If it's not a through track, then the train will stop, turn around, and go back the way it came. And those were in for the most part generally running. So and a variety. You'd have the passenger train leaves, and then what happens after the passenger train leaves? Then a freight train starts switching freight cars in the yard, and it'll assemble its train. Then a passenger train arrives. It'll turn around and locomotive switches to the other end of the passenger cars, and it will leave, and the freight train will then assemble its cars for departure, and it will leave with the freight cars, and then another passenger train will arrive, and then maybe a freight train. So there's variety. They don't necessarily have a timetable. Something I've noticed about British model railway shows is the demonstrators tend to run to a timetable. So you see every locomotive and every piece of rolling stock over the course of 30 minutes to an hour. And then it resets and they start again. They start the timetable over. So, for interest and enjoyment, the smaller layouts seem to be the best thing. If you it's like the layout I've got in my basement. I can sit and watch train goes by, and I don't have to intervene with anything. The train goes by, I wait a minute, the train goes by again. And it's just something you can, there's no what's the word for it? There's no pressure. You're just, you're sitting watching trains go by, or you can, you can get a little bit involved and have your passenger train stop at the station and sort of emulate a what do you call it? Emulate a timetable, but it's not. It's not big pressure. And eventually I will have a yard built, so if I want to play trains and shuffle freight cars around, I can do that while trains drive by. But the problem with these big loop layouts, they weren't doing anything but just set a train and people will watch it go by. So less satisfying to view. But as I said initially, a lot of them were having, when we got there, they were trying to run trains, but the track connections were bad, or the track was dirty. And a lot of display layouts, they will, as soon as they take them down at the venue, they go into a trailer, a covered trailer or a covered van. They get put into storage until the next show. This is the only Great West, or the only Great British train show in the Ontario section. So the next time any of them may have an opportunity to display will be in 2 years' time. So potentially these models could be sitting up for 2 years, gathering dust, and depends on how dry the storage area is. So they have teething problems. You've got to put them together and make sure everything works. So like I said, the first hour or so, that's what a lot of them were doing. They'd run a train round, it would stop. So one guy would run over with his track cleaner and clean the track, push the train back out of the way, and then as soon as he cleaned the track, he'd wait until the train comes round and see if it still has a problem, and if it goes through okay, go up to the next point that it's having issues with. And I'm sure by Sunday afternoon, things were probably running fairly smoothly. There were some displays which were, and there was one guy, he built all of the locomotives out of copper or brass or something. He'd built the track as well, but he didn't have anything running. It was kind of like, here's what I've got up to, and give him his due. It looked very impressive. Someone who's building locomotives, passenger cars, freight cars, track, and making a model railway out of it, that takes a lot of skill. It's probably something my grandfather might have been able to do, but me, no, that's beyond my skills. But anyway, so and he didn't have a fiddle yard at each end. It wasn't powered, so you just it was just a display of, here's the stuff I'm working on, this is as far as I've got. Now maybe in 2 years' time we'll actually get to see the trains painted, the track work finished, and looking somewhat realistic, and a bit more scenery. He had some buildings, he didn't have trees and shrubs and people and what have you. It was very much a work in progress. But as I said, maybe in 2 years' time he'll actually have it working, and that will be another impressive thing to see. And then there were all the vendors. So the event was sponsored by Rapido Trains UK, who are one of the model manufacturers, and staffed by Rapido US folks. So good conversations with them. One of the worries that people who model British Railways have is, if I order a locomotive from the UK and it doesn't work, I now have a problem, because I have to ship it back to the UK at my own expense for them to fix, replace, whatever, and then have it shipped back. So it's not with me for at least a month, and I had to pay, $50 or $100, including insurance, to ship it back to them. And I had to buy the padded boxes and everything else, and mailing stuff. And that's not precisely ideal, especially not sending things through international air. But talking to the Rapido guy, one of the visitors said, so could we send our Rapido trains to you to fix, our UK? And he said, well, we don't normally do it, but you could send it to us. We've got, they've got a team of guys who can fix electrical problems and troubleshoot why something's not working and potentially fix it. So if the local guys can, they'll try and fix it. Even though they're not familiar with the model, they're familiar enough with repairing models. So it's not a stretch. But they said, and if we have a big problem, we can't fix it, we can contact Rapido UK, send the stuff over to them, and they can deal with the problem, which is usually this thing's terminal, they need a replacement. Not that Rapido have many of those anymore. They used when they started out, and they're a fairly new UK manufacturer. Their models are incredible quality as far as appearance. They are really, really good with their accuracy in modeling stuff from the real world, and I'm missing bits here. And it's the same with the Cura scale, but when they bought things out, there were teething problems. And they'll freely accept, we had teething problems. But it's like there's 6 months to a year between each new release. And so, they had GWR 1500 pannier tank. It was dire. It had really big problems. Some people, it was completely unbalanced, so it would rock from side to side as it was moving. The electrical contacts inside were sometimes bad, and a lot of people reviewed it and said this is not the best quality. The next locomotive Rapido bought out didn't have any of those problems, and because they had so many returns back to their warehouse to fix the issues, they were able to take on board, what do we do to fix this? Okay, let's make sure that the next time we make something, this is not a problem, we know how to fix it. So their model reliability, I won't say quality. Quality can include, what does it look like? And the what does it look like quality is way better than Hornby and Bachmann, who are the old kids on the block. But their functional quality was back in the 1920s. If you want to train, 2020s, if you want a train that works, buy Hornby or Bachmann. If you want a train that looks good, buy a Curascale or Rapido. Now a Curascale and a Rapido are getting to the point where not only do their trains look better than Hornby, they run as good as Hornby, and they're significantly cheaper than Hornby. So Hornby's got a problem. The downside with the new kids on the block is they don't do mass production. They will say, we are planning to produce this locomotive, please express your interest. Two ways to express your interest. You can contact them on their website and say, yes, I'm interested in having one of those. Or you can contact a retailer and say, yes, I'm interested in having one of those. So either way, the manufacturer knows you want it because you told them, or they know you want it because you told a retail outlet and the retailer has said, yes, I want X number of these. So the retailer will put in an order for all of his, all of the pre-orders that have been placed, and then he'll usually order about 10 more of each version of the model. And the problem, I mean, part of that works well, but the 10 he orders don't last long. I mean, there are some where, yes, we've just got delivery of X. If you want one and you didn't pre-order, jump to it. If you do not jump to it within 2 days, you may be looking at they have none left. They're sold out. Now, admittedly, a lot, at least as well, no, as far as steam engines go, there are at a minimum three liveries. There's the original the original rail company's livery, and sometimes the original rail company will have 3 or 4 early livery changes. Then there's early British Rail and late British Rail, and within the British Rail stable, they can be, for steam engines, they can be green or black. So potentially you've got 4 British Rail designs plus an original company livery, or 3 or 4. So that's that 10 that the retailer orders is all of them. So if there's 5 different paint jobs on a model, they will order 50, and they know they can sell them. With Hornby, they don't ask. They just, we're going to produce we're going to do a run of 1,000 of these. And if they don't sell them all, it doesn't matter, because it's something that the retailers have on their shelves that people who are walking by say, oh, look, there's trains, let's go and have a look what they have. And so you can pick up stuff that is 2-3 years old. Now, 6 years old, they're probably sold out by now. But 2-3 years old, there's Hornby stuff that's sitting on the shelf for 2 or 3 years, but it's not a big deal. It means that the casual shopper can walk by and say, yeah, I'll buy that. That looks nice. And they don't, the newer manufacturers, you have to plan it. And if you don't plan it, or you don't know something's coming out, chances are you're not going to get one. And then you're relying on them producing another run later. As an example, I've got a Dapol Manor, and I bought that at about £150, so math to work into dollars, and it's a nice locomotive. Now, at the time I bought that, Accurascale was producing a Manor too, but I didn't pre-order it, so I couldn't get my hands on one. But a Manor's a Manor, even if it's Dapol. Dapol is not as good a quality as Accurascale, but they're good enough. So I got one of those. Dapol have since done 2 more runs of their manor. I think Acura Scale has done 1. But then a lot of other locomotives, it's almost one and done, which is unfortunate. But anyway, so Dapol's just done another run, their 3rd, and that was probably about a year ago, and that's now on sale for £99, which is 45% off. Don't know why they're doing it, but they are. They might need some money because they're developing 2 new locomotives this year. They usually have quite a quick turnaround on their new productions. So yeah, I could have picked up a second manor with a different name and number, because that's one thing they do. When a manufacturer does a second run, they'll usually change the name and the numbers. The only time they don't is Flying Scotsman, Mallard, the famous trains. They just come out when they come out. It's actually harder I think, to get a sister of the Mallard or the Flying Scotsman, because everybody wants them. So that's what the manufacturers produce when they do a run. But yeah. So anyway, I talked to the Rapido guys, and as I said, they said they could take Rapido locomotives that didn't work. The guy did point out, because I said, oh, I bought a Hornby Castle and just got round to putting a sound decoder in it. And I said, I looked up when the Castle was introduced, 2023. So that's been sitting in a box for 3 years. And he heard that. He said, yeah, we only actually have a 2-year warranty from the date of purchase. I have to make sure that I don't leave trains in their boxes for 3 years before I decide to put a DCC decoder in them and get them running on the layout. I mean, in my defense, I didn't have a layout to run on until Christmas last year. So I had been set, basically I look at things and I say, that would fill a gap that I've got. At the moment, I've got probably about 8 tender locomotives, mainline locomotives for Americans. And I don't really need any more. What I do not have is switchers. I got my first switcher in August, literally 2 weeks before the tariffs kick in, and I got my second switcher last week. So yeah, I still have vacancies for smaller switching locomotives. Maybe not many, but a couple would fit well with what I have. I could do with a lot of more freight cars. Probably don't need much in the way of passenger cars. So it's kind of like you look at a thing and you say, do I need one of these? Well, in my case, does this fit with what I'm modelling or not? And if it doesn't fit, then we can skip it and move on. My stone picker's full. We're going to have to deal with that in a minute. I did find that stone pickers don't work unless the ground has been recently cultivated. So I tried to stone pick on the soybean fields and it didn't work. That's not a problem. The soybean field's only really suffering from stones right around the edge where I ploughed the edge of the field to make sure that the game's defining the field consistently. So yeah, and then I went round and talked to some of the other retailers. There used to be a retailer called Model Railway Imports, and he sold up. He went out of it. He decided he didn't want to keep doing it. He's old, or he was at the time, so he just said, yeah, he's done. He's not going to do this anymore. And he sold all his stock to somebody else. I actually met the guy who he sold his stock to, and I did ask him what's the chances of getting orders delivered to the US, and he said, yeah, we don't do that, because I got the impression when the tariffs came in, very, very, very quickly, the Royal Mail in England sat down and set their systems up to remit tariff duties to